Welcome back to our Week 3 College Football Top 25 rankings. So, we've made two of these already. We're going to be doing these every Tuesday from here on out until the end of the season. So, if you're new around here, make sure you subscribe, turn on the noties, and like this video if you enjoy. Not only do we do college football, we're doing NFL every single weekly picks for every game. We're doing MLB every single week. NBA and college basketball will be coming when those seasons start to pick up. But with all that being said, real quick before we jump into the top 25, links in the description as always: X, Twitch, TikTok, Discord. Make sure you follow all those, join those, whatever you'd like to do. But with all that being said, let's get in to our number 25 team, and that's going to be the Boise State Broncos. Now, I know typically this doesn't happen. When a team loses, they usually, more often than not, move down. But this time I actually have them moving up into the top 25, and the reason behind this is, I mean, they went into Oregon losing and lost by 3 points. They lose 37-34. Their running back Ashton Genty, I think he should be the front runner for Heisman at this point. He just went into Oregon, rushed for 192 yards and 3 touchdowns. Let's not forget the week before, he rushed for, I believe, 6 touchdowns. 6 touchdowns, 267 yards. I mean, ridiculous stuff. He's on pace for 54 touchdowns this year in 12 games. That's just ridiculous. So you got to give him props here. I mean, he is a phenomenal player. They got a bye this week. So no game prediction here for the Boise State Broncos. But, man, they looked really impressive. And they were my 12 seed in the preseason for the Group of 5 team. I definitely wouldn't be shocked if they end up being the Group of 5 team to get into the playoffs because they are really, really good. They looked really good against Oregon. But moving to our number 24 team, and that's going to be the Texas A&M Aggies. Now, when looking at the Aggies, they're not ranked in the AP poll, and I guess for good reason. They lost at home against Notre Dame. They looked pretty solid, though, against McNeese. I had them in my top 25 last week. I didn't feel the need to drop them out of the top 5 or the top 25. Yeah, they played solid. I mean, about as solid as you could ask. They played against McNeese. Connor Weigman really didn't do much throwing the ball, so we'll see how, his season continues to go. But looking at their upcoming game at Florida, I do think they win 26-21. I think it's going to be a really close game. DJ Lagway is starting for the Gators, which could be interesting. They're favored by 4. I have them winning by 5, so I guess you could say I have them covering the spreads. I think this could be a very close game. In the swamp. Florida didn't look very good against Miami, but Texas A&M isn't as good as Miami, to be fair. So, I could definitely see. I could definitely see this game going either way, but I do think the Aggies are just a little bit better on both sides of the ball here. Both teams very talented, but I am going to go with A&M to win that game. Number 23, I've got the Louisville Cardinals. They're making their first appearance in my top 25, and they were ranked in the AP poll last week, I believe. I didn't have them ranked, but now I do. They're actually at 19 in the AP poll, so a little bit higher. But yeah, they beat Austin Peay 62-0 week 1. Last week, they got a home game against Jacksonville State. They looked really good. Tyler Show, 349 yards, 2 touchdowns. Receiving rise, Ja'Cory Brooks had a nice game. Louisville's looking really solid this year as of right now. They have a bye this week, so no game prediction for them. But that game against Georgia Tech at home will be, their next 3 games are all going to say a lot about them. Home versus Georgia Tech, at Notre Dame, and then home against SMU. It's a very tough stretch there. They have a pretty tough schedule. You also look at Miami, Boston College, Clemson. None of those games are easy either. They also have at Kentucky. It's a pretty tough schedule, but as of right now, I do have them ranked. But looking at our next team, number 22, the Iowa State Cyclones, they go into Kinnick Stadium and knock off the Hawkeyes after trailing 13-0. I believe it was 13-0 at halftime. And yeah, Rocco Becht had a really nice game, 272 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did have the pick, but ultimately they did come out on top. Jalen Noel, receiving rise, 133 yards and a touchdown on only 5 receptions. He looked really solid. This Iowa State team, I had them winning, I think, 8 games in my preseason Big 12 prediction. They could definitely make some noise. They could be a sneaky team in the Big 12. I mean, you look at the schedule. At Kansas is a tough game. At West Virginia, I guess you'd say is a tough game. At I mean, they should. I wouldn't be surprised if they're going into the game at Utah 10-0. I mean, I really wouldn't. Kansas is going to be a really hard game. Texas Tech, nothing to scoff at either. But I don't know. This Iowa State team looked really good. Come from behind win on the road. Was not expecting them to, especially with how good Iowa looked week one. But they do get it done, so good on them. Again, no game here for Iowa State, so there's going to be no game prediction for them. But looking at our number 21 team, it's going to be Nebraska. They had a home game against Colorado. They won 28-10, and their defense was the real story here. They looked really good. They really contained Shedeur Sanders. They really contained Travis Hunter. I mean, they got a whole lot of pass rush. Now, how much is that Nebraska's defense, or if it's just Colorado's O-line being garbage? You could pick. I'd probably lean towards Colorado's offensive line issues, but the Nebraska defense nonetheless looked very solid, only allowing 10 points against those two guys. Pretty impressive stuff. Dylan Raiola in his first real test, 185 yards and a touchdown, 0 interceptions. He played a solid game. He's still a freshman, but Nebraska, man, they're 2-0. And at this point, I wouldn't be shocked if they're 7-0 going to Columbus when they play Ohio State. But looking at this game against Northern Iowa, I think they'll win no problems here. I think 45-6 is what I'm going to go with. I think it's a similar game to the UTEP game. I think they win pretty easily here. No troubles. Number 20, I have Clemson moving up 2 spots after the worrisome Week 1 game where they got blown out against Georgia. They respond with a 46-point win over App State. Nearly put up 70. Was not expecting this. I thought this game was going to be really close. App State was one of those teams people were saying can make the 12-team playoff. Clemson just absolutely blew the brakes off of them. I mean, this was never a question. Cade Klubnik threw for 378 yards and 5 touchdowns. He had a great game. Phil Maffa ran for over 100 yards and a touchdown. It was just a all-out offensive explosion here for the Tigers. If their offense can look as good as they did this week, the rest of the season, they could definitely make some noise. They could win the ACC. I mean, it's wide open now with Florida State gone. Miami's still there, but Clemson could definitely still win the ACC. I don't want to write them off just yet. Now they're on a bye this week, so there's gonna be no prediction here once again. But yeah, like I said, moving up 2, I got Clemson at 20. Now this is where we get to some of the more interesting teams. Michigan. They dropped down 8 spots, and man, they looked pretty bad. Home against Texas, they lose by 19. And honestly, it felt like Texas should have won by more. They got just dominated on offensively, defensively. I mean, Texas was definitely the better offense. Defensively, I think Texas's defense honestly played better than Michigan's, and that was supposed to be their strong suit. But with Michigan, there was no run game. They didn't control the clock like they used to. I mean, it was just I don't know. I don't know what happened. They just did not look. It did not look like the typical Michigan team. I thought they were gonna run the ball, chew the clock, control the game, play their style. They just couldn't get anything going against Texas. Davis Warren, 204 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks. Donovan Edwards only had 8 carries for 41 yards. Colston Loveland had another good game, but besides him, nobody on this Michigan offense really caught the ball and did anything for them. Texas just looked very good. Michigan looked very bad, and I do worry because they got a game here in 2 weeks against USC, and the way that USC's looked, I'm not so sure they win that game. It is at home, but yeah, I mean, you start looking at the schedule. I predicted them to go 9-3 preseason. I wouldn't be shocked if they go 8-4 with the way they're playing, and the way Illinois looked. Through 2 weeks, they just took down Kansas at Illinois too. That could be a game they lose. So, I'm not gonna overreact, but I do have to drop them down quite a bit. They did not look good whatsoever. But looking at their game here against Arkansas State, I think they'll win 30-0. I think they have a nice bounce back game here. They're not a team that's gonna go and score a million points. We know this, but definitely concerning for their playoff hopes. Number 18, what in the world happened this week for Notre Dame? They go into College Station at Kyle Field. They knock off the Texas A&M Aggies, who were ranked inside my top 25. They win by 10. And then they come back the following week, home game against Northern Illinois. Should have no problems here. And they go out and lose. I mean, what are we doing? We've seen this happen with Notre Dame in the past. Honestly, it feels like couple seasons. I just don't understand what's wrong. Maybe it's a coaching thing. Maybe it's Marcus Freeman. I couldn't tell you because this has happened way too often here if you're Notre Dame. So yeah, definitely not what you want to see from them. Um, it's just a bad look. I mean, people were saying I was saying this after they beat A&M week 1. I was saying 12-0. You look at the schedule, the only tough game at this point at USC. So even if they win out and go 11-1, do they really deserve to make the playoffs? They're only going to have a win over USC and A&M if they're ranked at that point. Maybe Georgia Tech, maybe Louisville, maybe Florida State finish ranked. At this point, I mean, they're definitely gonna need to go 11-1. I don't think they make the playoffs if they go 10-2. They've left themselves no wiggle room whatsoever. It's just a terrible outcome if you're Notre Dame. I don't know how this keeps happening to them. It's probably going to be the biggest upset of the year if we're being honest. I mean, Riley Leonard just awful game, 163 yards, 0 touchdowns, 2 picks. Jeremiah Love had a nice game, but I mean, it was a competitive game. It's not like there was a crazy comeback or any. I mean, it was Northern Illinois was winning. For They were up 13-7 at halftime. Notre Dame took the lead midway through the third, and then it was just back and forth, and they couldn't pull away. And Northern Illinois comes out on top. I did think about ranking them, but if we're being real, I don't know if they're deserving of a top 25. We'll see as the year goes on, but I'm not sure. Now they got a game at Purdue, and it's really hard for me to think they go out there and dominate just because of the way they looked. Now I am gonna say they win just because I'm not sure how good Purdue is. They're favored by 10 right now. I've been winning by 10. 27-17. I don't think they're gonna go out and score a crazy amount. It's on the road, but again, I'm not sure how good Purdue is. Now if they go on and lose this game, I think you could chalk the season. No playoffs. I mean Notre Dame's their schedule's so easy. So if they do end up losing 2 games, I don't think the playoffs are reachable in my opinion for them. Just abysmal how they played last week. But moving on to some more positive things to talk about. Numbers actually not really. Number 17, I got Arizona moving up 1 spot. Now I was gonna move them up higher, but the way they played against Northern Arizona, a lot of teams struggled this week. It was a weird week. Northern Arizona, I mean, what are we doing? They're at home. The offense put up 61 against New Mexico the previous week. Now they can barely score over 20 against Northern Arizona. I mean, what are we doing? They're losing by 10. They're losing 10-6 at halftime. Now, luckily in the second half, Northern Arizona couldn't do anything offensively, but the offense just looked non-existent for Arizona. I mean, I expected them to blow them out. Noah Fafita only 173 yards, a touchdown and a pick. Um, Tedero McMillan coming off his 300-yard game, he got 2 receptions for 11 yards. I mean, they just couldn't get anything going. Good on Northern Arizona, I guess. I mean, Arizona did end up winning, unlike Notre Dame. But now they got at Kansas State, going to the Wildcats to play them. This is a Kansas State team I think will make the Big 12 championship game. It's also on the road. It's a Friday night game. Kansas State's going to be the more physical team here in lines of scrimmage. I'm not sure how confident I feel about Arizona here, especially with the way they played against Northern Arizona. Maybe it was a trap game, but even then, I mean, it's Northern Arizona, and they had it at home. I don't know. I don't like this matchup here for them. I'm going to take Kansas State to win 28-21, but I am very excited for this game. It's going to be a very close game, I think. I do think Kansas State is slightly better, though. But number 16, we're going to talk about LSU now. The final score really doesn't show the full I guess, truth of this game. I did have LSU um, jumping Arizona just because of the fact that I think Arizona struggled a little bit more. If you actually watch the game, LSU did end up winning by 23. But I mean, going into halftime, they were only up 23 to 14. Coming out of the half, Nichols broke off a huge run. It was like 70 yards. They got it to within 2 points, and then they just couldn't do anything after that. But yeah, I mean, I'm not super worried about LSU. They're coming off a tough game against USC. I think they're still trying to figure things out, what they're gonna be, what their identity is. Garrett Nussmeier, 302 yards, 6 touchdowns, and a pick, or I mean, and 0 picks. So I mean, passing wise, they're very solid. Kyron Lacey had 5 receptions, 65 yards, 3 touchdowns. Um, yeah, I'm not too worried about LSU. It was a close game for a little, but they did end up figuring it out. Now at South Carolina could be a tough game. South Carolina is 2-0. I think they'll win, but I think it'll be closer than some people are expecting. But looking at our next team, number 15, Oklahoma, another team. There's a lot of teams in this range that struggled. Oklahoma 16 to 12 against Houston at home. Now this is not um this final score. It was 14 to 12. Oklahoma gets the safety in the last 2 minutes and end up winning the game. But Jackson Arnold only 174 yards, 2 touchdowns, a pick. I mean, he honestly got outplayed by Houston's quarterback, Donovan Smith. I think he had a better game than Jackson Arnold did. I mean, nobody really did anything for Oklahoma. I will say the defense for Oklahoma looks very good, so that is definitely a plus. But offensively, you can't be doing this against Houston, especially with it being at home. It's not like it's a huge trap game or anything. Yeah, I mean, and with the schedule, they're gonna have to take care of business with these teams because when you look at who they play, Tennessee, Texas, Ole Miss, Alabama, Missouri, all top 7 teams as of right now. Not to mention at Auburn's not an easy game. Um, and at LSU to close out the year, I mean they're gonna be lucky if they can win some of those games because this is a brutal schedule. With all that being said, though, Oklahoma, I got them at 15, moving up 2 spots. This game here coming up against Tulane, we just saw Tulane give Kansas State some problems. Kansas State did win. Um, Tulane definitely should have took it to overtime. That offensive pass interference for them was ridiculous. But besides the point, Oklahoma's going to have this one at home. Kansas State was on the road against Tulane. I think Tulane kind of gave out a little bit I think they're going to be running low on fumes on energy here against Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma does win, but I think it's close. I think it's a 10-point game. But number 14, speaking of Kansas State, well, speaking of Tulane, I guess, they Kansas State wins at Tulane 34 to 27. Very close game, very back and forth game. Tulane was really winning for most of this game, but Kansas State pulls away at the last moment. I mean, they really escaped. If we're being honest, I mean, they were losing pretty much until about 10 minutes left in the fourth. I mean, they were losing literally the entire game. Then in the fourth, they get the fumble return for a touchdown, puts them up by 7, and then Tulane really just couldn't get that touchdown to tie the game, which is unfortunate. But I think this was a little bit of a trap game for Kansas State. Avery Johnson had a solid game, 181 yards, 2 touchdowns. DJ Giddens, 114 yards on the ground, 63 yards receiving, and a receiving touchdown. He had an amazing game. Yeah, like I said, I think this was a little bit of a trap game here. They got the home game against Arizona, a ranked team coming up, going on the road to Tulane, who's not an easy group of 5 team to beat at all. I do think they'll win against Arizona. Like I said, I think they're a little bit more physical. I think they're going to run the ball, control the time of possession, and control the pace of the game. So I do think they beat Arizona. They also get it at home. It's a night game. I think the atmosphere is going to be electric here for Kansas State. I do think they win, but this is going to be a very fun game to watch. Definitely, in my opinion, the game of the week. I honestly do believe this is the best game of the week, but there's some other solid games we'll get to here shortly. But looking at our number 13 team, it's going to be Oklahoma State, and they survive against Arkansas in overtime, 39-31. I mean, man, if Arkansas makes that field goal in the first overtime, they win. I mean, Oklahoma State loses because Oklahoma State missed the field goal in the first overtime. They do win in the second overtime, though. Um, when looking at this team, how they played, Arkansas I think will be better than a lot of people thought. Ollie Gordon really didn't do that much. 17 carries, 49 yards, a touchdown. I'd like to see a little bit more out of him. But Brennan Presley had a solid game. Alan Bowman actually, 326 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. That's a pretty good game for him. I mean, they really didn't have a choice. They couldn't really run the ball. He led them from behind and threw a whole lot of good passes and actually led them to the come from behind victory. So I was actually pretty impressed. And I know it shouldn't be this close at home against Arkansas, but like I said, I think Arkansas is a little bit better than we thought, and I think I was actually impressed with the way that Alan Bowman played. Um, you know, given the circumstances. But coming up, they got at Tulsa. I think they'll win pretty easily here. I got 41-21. I think it'll be a similar type game to South Dakota State, but they have two pretty quality wins here in the first 2 weeks. South Dakota State, one of the best. I mean, they are the best FCS team, and Arkansas, an SEC team, Power 5 win. That's always good to have. At Tulsa, I think they should win as well. But looking at our number 12 team, I feel like there's a little bit of a tier gap once we get here. It's going to be Oregon. They're moving down another 3 spots. They debuted in our top 25 as the number 3 team in the country. They're all the way down to 12 through 2 weeks of the season. But when you look at that schedule there over on the right side, home against Idaho, you shouldn't be winning by 10. You should be winning by at least 45. Boise State at home. I know Boise State's a really good team, but 3 points on a last-second field goal. I mean, their lines of scrimmage don't look good. They've been dominated through the past 2 weeks. I mean, the first 2 weeks of the season. Dylan Gabriel's had a solid game, 243 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no picks. Jordan James had a good game rushing wise. Evan Stewart, Tez Johnson did absolutely nothing here for them. Um, yeah, I mean, the story here is their lines of scrimmages just look outmatched through the first 2 weeks of the season. Maybe they figure it out. I really don't know. I have them moving down. They have not looked good at all. And coming up, they got the Civil War here in week 3. It's weird to see this. It's on the road. I think at this point, it's hard for me to say that they can blow a team out just because of the way they look. This is also a rivalry game on the road. So Oregon State's going to get up for this game. This is really their only big game this year. I think it'll be closer than some people are saying. I do think though Oregon at this point will kind of have figured some things out. So I don't think it'll be a 3-point, 10-point game like the past two. I think they'll win by a little bit more than they have shown through the first 2 weeks, but I do think it's going to be still pretty close just because of the fact that it's on the road, it's a rivalry game. But yeah, Oregon's not looked good whatsoever. But moving to our number 11 team, we got Utah. And when looking at Utah, they moved down 1 spot just because of the struggle game against Baylor. And with no Cam Rising, he got injured. It is worrisome. He's gone through a lot of injuries. It looks like he injured his hand. I mean, they went up 23-0 in this game. But once he got out, they really just couldn't do anything offensively. The defense held it together, though. Baylor got it to the final score by the end of the third quarter, and they couldn't score at all in the fourth. So Utah was lucky there. I'm interested to see if Cam Rising will play in this game. I do think they'll win regardless because I don't think Utah State's that good. But it is on the road. It is an in-state game, so it could be interesting Looking at our number 10 team, I have Missouri. Now, I'm a little bit lower on Missouri than the A people. I believe the A people has them at 6, which I think is a little high. I will say, though, the defense has looked really good. I know they only played Murray State and Buffalo, but 51-0 and 38-0, that's pretty solid through 2 weeks, giving up 0 points. And a lot of people are saying this team is only offense, no defense. And you look at, they're having a little bit of both here. Now, I am going to be keeping my eye out on this game against Boston College. Boston College is ranked right now in the AP poll. They just missed the cut in my top 25. They're definitely either the first team out or one of the first teams out. I do think Missouri will win, but I think it's going to be a pretty close game. Missouri is actually favored by 17, which is kind of crazy to me. I think Boston College covers just because they've looked very solid through the first 2 weeks of the season. But yeah, I think if Missouri goes out and blows them out, I'll definitely have to move them up. I'm just keeping it a little bit conservative here with my Missouri ranking. Moving to number 9, though, I have USC moving up 4 spots, jumping teams like Oregon, Utah, and Missouri. I just think they've looked so dominant through the first 2 weeks. They go into Vegas and beat LSU week 1 and then come out and beat Utah State 48-0. We've said this many years before, many years in a row now. What happens if Lincoln Riley gets a good defense? Well, ladies and gentlemen, he has a good defense. This defense has looked phenomenal. Um, and yeah, I mean that's really all I can say. Um, they gave up 0 points. I mean Miller Moss had another very good game. 229 yards and a touchdown on the day. Woody Marks rushing. They had 5 rushing touchdowns, which that's kind of crazy. But I mean they've looked really good, so I definitely believe they're a top 10 team as of right now, kind of out of nowhere. I don't think anyone really expected this. They got a bye this week, but next week in the Big House against Michigan, that's going to be a very good game. Number 8, though, Penn State moving down 1 spot. Another team that struggled this week, home against Bowling Green. You can't be losing at halftime to Bowling Green, especially at home. I mean, that's just not what you want to see. Definitely worrisome. They looked really good week 1. And then coming into week 2, they just, I don't know, maybe it was a hangover game. It's still early in the season. I feel like people forget that, so I'm going to cut them a little bit of slack, but I do have to move them down 1 just because of the fact that Drew Aller, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick against Bowling Green. They're lucky their rushing attack is so good. Nick Singleton, 119 yards and a touchdown. Katron Allen had 100 yards. So they're lucky that they got that going, but I mean, that is, very worrisome. They got a game. They don't have a game this week because they're on bye against Kent State. So moving on to our number 7 team. What an impressive game. They're moving up 7 spots. I don't care. Tennessee looks really good, man. Nico Iamaleava, he is going to be a problem for the SEC for the next couple years here. I mean, they just go into NC State. I know it was a neutral site, but it wasn't. I believe it was in North Carolina or South Carolina, one of the two. So uh, kind of a neutral site, but not really. They go in there, win by 41. Tennessee is another one of those teams. What happens when they get a good defense? Well, folks, they have a very good defense. Dylan Sampson had an amazing game running the ball. I mean, they just blew them out. NC State couldn't do anything offensively. The defense, I feel like people are getting very hyped about Nico, which for a good reason, but the defense is really the story, I think. Their defense looks really good. I think they blow out Kent State 59-7 here. But looking at our next team, number 6 is going to be Miami. They're moving up 2 spots. They go out and they have a game against Florida A&M, and they take care of business, winning 56-9. Cam Ward looked amazing once again. The team, just as a whole, looks very good. I think they'll have no problems here going up against Ball State. I think they win in blowout fashion. In this game, I have them winning 53-10. Moving into our top 5, number 5, I have Ole Miss, and they took care of business against Middle Tennessee. They win 52-3. Jackson Dart with another great game. And yeah, Ole Miss looks like a really good team. Honestly, once we get into this top five range, I feel like there's another little bit of a tier gap here until we get to the top three. Because in my opinion, this team and the next team we're going to talk about here in a second are just a little bit ahead of 6 through 12. I think that's kind of a tier in itself, but I think 4 and 5 are a tier where they could win the national championship, but I wouldn't consider them favorites as of right now. But yeah, Jackson Dart almost threw for 400 yards. Henry Parrish rushing wise, 4 touchdowns, 165 yards. Trey Harris, another great game. Ole Miss looks really good. They got a kind of a tough game here on the road against Wake Forest. I do think they'll win no problem, but it is on the road. It is a night game. It is a Power 5 opponent, so we'll see how good they look, but I'm definitely expecting them to take care of business and go out there Saturday night and win. But number 4, it's going to be Alabama. And I definitely did consider moving them down to 5 and Ole Miss up to 4. I kept them at 4. They did end up winning by a decent amount against South Florida. They had a very good fourth quarter, but when you look at this, the final score does not tell the story of this game at all. I mean, South Florida was doing what they did to them last year. I mean, it was 13 to 4 until about 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and even with it was a 5 point game with 7 minutes to go. I mean, Alabama does end up winning by, they end up winning by 26. But Jalen Milroe, 194 yards, 2 touchdowns through the air. Ryan Williams, another great game. He's going to be a problem here with his years at Alabama. He looks really good, and he is very, very young. Jam Miller, 140 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Justice Haynes broke off a big one for a touchdown in this game late. So they do end up winning by a considerable amount. But if they play like they did against South Florida here on the road against Wisconsin here, they could very well lose. They're favored by 16. I'm not expecting them to lose. I think they'll win. I think they'll figure it out. Kalen DeBoer is a very good head coach. He's still getting adjusted. He's still getting things going. They're going to have to focus up for this Wisconsin game because, like I said, it's on the road. Wisconsin's solid team, 2-0 on the year to start. I do think they'll win, though. I don't think Wisconsin's offense will be very good, and I don't think it'll be good enough to really do much here against Alabama. And I honestly don't think their defense is good enough to slow down Alabama's offense enough, or as much as they'll need it to be slowed down. But coming up, man, I know it's not next week because they have a bye next week, but in 2 weeks from Saturday, they're playing Georgia at home. They're going to need to really figure things out because they cannot play how they did against South Florida against Georgia. But moving into the top 3, and like I said, this is kind of another whole tier. These are the clear national championship favorites, in my opinion. Ohio State is moving down once again. They debuted as number 1. They're all the way down to 3 now. They moved down last week to 2, and now they're moving down to 3. They win 56-0 against Western Michigan. They looked really good in doing so. The defense made a lot of plays. I mean, obviously, they didn't score a point. And offensively, Will Howard looked very good once again, 292 yards and a touchdown. Julian Sayin got in for a little bit at the end of the game. He threw a touchdown. Rushing-wise, Quinshon Judkins, 2 touchdowns on the day, 108 yards on 9 carries. Travion Henderson, 10 carries, 66 yards, also 2 touchdowns. They had 6 rushing touchdowns on the day. Jeremiah Smith, 119 yards and a touchdown. Emeka Ibuka had just under 100 yards this game. This team's really good. They're loaded with talent once again. They got a bye this week, so no prediction here. But moving to our number 2 team, we talked about this earlier. They go into the big house. This should say at Michigan, my bad. They went 31-12. They looked really good in doing so defensively and offensively. I was worried about their defense coming into the season. Maybe I shouldn't be. They only give up 12 points to Michigan. They shut out Colorado State in their season opener. And offensively, Quinn Ewers, he's really the only guy that I would say right now has a chance over Ashton Jeanty, the running back for Boise State. He could definitely win Heisman. He's probably the favorite to win it right now, for being honest. But man, they looked really, really good against Michigan. They look scary, so they move up to number 2. They got a game coming up against UTSA. I think they'll blow them out, no problems. They're favored by 35. I think they win 49-0. But moving on to our number 1 team, Georgia is going to stay at number 1. It's Georgia. I mean, they win 48-3 against Tennessee Tech. No surprises there. Now at Kentucky should be a little bit interesting. They're favored by 24. However, I don't think there's any world Kentucky wins. However, I have Kentucky covering. 24 points is a lot. I don't know if Georgia's offense can get that much of a difference between Kentucky. I think it'll be close for maybe the first quarter. I think Georgia figures it out after that. And same thing I said with Alabama. I think they're much more figured it out. I mean, they beat Clemson 34-3, who's ranked, still ranked. But they got a road game against Alabama coming up 2 weeks from Saturday. That's going to be a huge game. They also have at Texas and at Ole Miss later on the schedule. They also have Tennessee at home, who Tennessee is looking like a whole new team. So they have a pretty tough schedule. Um, but it is Georgia. Don't be surprised if they go 12-0. I'm going 13-0 and winning the SEC in my preseason SEC predictions. So definitely wouldn't be surprised. Carson Beck's probably going to go top 10 in the NFL draft at the very least. And yeah, this team's just loaded. I expect them to win against Kentucky. No problems here. But yeah, that's going to do it for the Week 3 Top 25 rankings. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, make sure you go on there, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and turn on the noties to make sure you don't miss whenever we post. Not only do we do college football, we do NFL every week. We're doing MLB every week until the baseball season's done. And once basketball season starts up, we do NBA, we do college basketball, both of those weekly. So make sure you subscribe. The content's really picking up here. It's the prime time to be on the channel. Make sure you go down there, subscribe. Links in the description. As always, X, Twitch, TikTok, Discord. Make sure you follow all those, join all those. With all that being said, though, hope you guys enjoyed this one. And I will see you guys tomorrow with our Week 2 NFL predictions. Hope you guys enjoyed this one.